in Los Angeles. I didn't have anything that close. I knew too much by then. The second day I was sitting in the YMCA after reading all the papers and looking for a job on the bulletin board or in the newspapers. I was sitting there when a young man came in, and he sat down and asked me, "How do you go about finding a job here?" Well, I started talking and I asked him, "Do you have a car?" He says, "Yes, I have a Model A." So I told him, well, on the bulletin board is a little ad or a little card looking for a young man with a car, great opportunities. What do you think it is? Well, he took a look and said, "Well, let's go and find out." So we drove around Los Angeles until we find the address. And it was the address of Claude de Haven. Incidentally, the name of the young man was Emil Syme. And while riding in the car with him, it turned out that he was a school teacher from North Dakota, had been teaching a little bit, but left to look for great adventures in Los Angeles. So he and I went to see Claude de Haven. He was a smooth-looking man, and he was a smooth talker. First, Syme went in, then he came out to get me. Claude de Haven was running a prospect mine out in the Mojave Desert. The name of the mine was Oro No Go. Either you find ore or it's no go. And I told him that I was a baker and could do cooking, and I would like to get in on that thing too. He offered a job on a percentage basis of the miner's stake, which is 50%. The crop staker, got the other 50%. So anyway, we ended up going with Claude de Haven out into the desert. Claude really wanted a Model A more than anything else, that is the use of it. But of course he needed somebody to work in the gold mine. We got out there, and all the mine consisted of was a vertical shaft about 30 feet deep when we got there, and a tent. And of course all the baggage I had with me was a very small suitcase. My big one I had stored in the YMCA. And so there I started gold mining. Claude de Haven had showed us gold in a little glass vial, and he says, "This is the stuff we are going to find." The work in the gold mine consisted of going down, the shaft was about 2 feet by 4 feet. We would climb down a vertical ladder, and with a hand jack and drill would drill 3 holes in 3 corners, 18-inch deep. Then we would put in a stick and a half of dynamite into each with a fuse, light the fuse, climb up and wait for the explosion, and then usually a few hours later or perhaps the following day we would go down and clean it. One man at a time could work down there. So that was quite interesting. I didn't mind going down and working a little bit, but since I also had agreed to do the cooking, I finally ended up with just having to work about 1 hour drilling and then loading the dynamite, setting the fuse and climbing out, because I was by far the fastest of all of them. I was the youngest. So for a few months now, that's my job. Did the cooking and the little washing that was to be done. Then while Syme would drill, Claude de Haven would be up on top, and ever so often I had to help, where Syme would clean out the loose rocks into a bucket, and with a winch we would turn it up, wind it up, and dump it on the outside. It was all granite, very, very little indication of any gold. It was we had an old Model T was rigged up at the head of the shaft, and the rear wheel was connected to a blower that would blow fresh air down into the shaft. That was clever, and it helped. It really got some fresh air down there. In order to get light down there, Claude had rigged up a mirror up on top. Naturally, out in the Mojave Desert, it never rains, always clear sunshine, so we would reflect sunlight down there, and kept working that way. It was great life. We never worked more than probably 4 hours a day, and so 4, possibly 5 hours. Our water we had to carry in barrels from a well about 15 miles from where we had our camp. Water was very, very expensive, naturally, and we had to be very thrifty. Cooking water, of course, was set aside in a special container. The water for washing dishes was poured into a tub, and after it settled, the top was poured off and used for washing the clothes or washing ourselves, shaving, stuff like that. And any water that was still usable after that would be used for washing the gold sand. In those days I really learned the value of water. It was a great life. Every time we had to go to get water, we would go down to the well, which really consisted of a tank, probably 12-foot diameter, 4-foot high, and a windmill would pump, and there were quite a few cattle around there. The windmill belonged to a rancher who owned all the cattle for, let's say, 10 miles around there. And we have to chase the cattle away, and then we could probably even take a dip in the tank to clean off the dust and wash. And the barrel and the water containers, we filled from the fresh water being pumped up. That had to be done once a week. Every 2 weeks we would go into Barstow to buy our supplies, and always hoped for a little mail. I had sent letters to Germany proudly proclaiming that I was now a gold miner. And Sundays usually we would take half a day off and go to a place where there was placer mining, and we had a dry blower and riffleboard and would get some gold dust. We all had a little glass vial of gold dust after we were there for a few weeks. Not very much, but just enough so we can talk about it. There I met some old miners, one by the name of Nelson, and old Sam Curden, half Indian, who owned a beautiful spot, a little canyon with a well close to his house. And of course he would make me sit down, and then generally he was half drunk because everybody was making beer in those days. It was prohibition. Then he would tell me about his experience as a miner, and he had a beautiful old smoking pipe, a meerschaum pipe. And when he got really drunk, he would make me sit down there, and he would tell me how he got hold of this beautiful meerschaum pipe. And he said, that's genuine meerschaum. I still remember that. That was old Dan Curtin. I really liked it out there in the desert. It was hot, but we worked only about 4 hours. When you are young, you don't mind it. Food, well, bacon and beans. Once a week we would have fresh meat, and we would have eggs for about 2 days. That's about as long as they would keep in the heat. Whenever possible, I would take a .22 rifle to go and shoot rabbits. We had quite a few rabbits there, so that was our fresh meat. I would try and climb every hill that was in the area, naturally always looking for quartz, with the possibility of finding a gold seam. I got to learn something about crystals and quartz especially, and I never got away from my interest in rocks. It was a great life out in the desert. After about 2 or 3 months, the miner Claude brought his wife out into the desert, which, well, I didn't think so much of it. Anyway, before he brought her out, we had another young man come over by the name of Keith. Long, 6'4", gangling kind of a character, very lazy, but he had been around. He had been around with a merchant or peddler who sold snake oil. And they would go to the farmers and give a spill telling him about the snake oil and all it would do for you. Keith had learned the poem Gunga Din by Rudyard Kipling, and whenever we had a few glasses of beer there in the evening, he would be half drunk and he would insist on reciting Gunga Din. I got sick and tired of Gunga Din. One day I took a plastic cap and put it under his cot, and when he started Gunga Din, off in the plastic cap and his spunk collapsed. Well, they blamed me for it, but couldn't do very much. Well, I ran and then I came back again and we had another glass of beer together, so everything was fine. They also took me snipe hunting, about 3 miles away from camp. Well, might have been only 2, and took me out in the desert. Of course, I pretended to be very ignorant and dumb. They always took me for very dumb. And so there they left me to hold the sack while they supposedly walked in a big circle to drive the snipes my way. But they no sooner had gone a few hundred yards when I ran out as quickly and quietly as I could to the road, took the key out of the Model A, walked back or ran back to jogged back to the camp, and I just sat down and laughed and told the miner what I did. And he laughed and we had a few drinks. Naturally, the 2 fellows went back to their car, didn't see the key, had to go all the way back to camp. And by that time, of course, the miner, he was all on my side, so he wouldn't let him beat me or anything like that. And everybody laughed, and they had to hike all the way back to the car to get their car back. They never again tried to pull that kind of a stunt on me. So, anyway, we had several little things like that happen. What I remembered most of the desert now, after about 50 years, the times we went to get water in that big tank which I mentioned, and we had a chance to jump into the tank and take a bath after a fashion. We probably didn't come out much cleaner than we went in, but at least it was refreshing. We had to go something like, I think 20 miles or more to get water. We carried it in a barrel and in 5-gallon cans, and we generally got a week's supply. The other thing I remembered mainly, usually on Sundays we went placer mining. There are quite a number of places around there, old mining camps, ghost towns, like there's Coolgardie, named after the famous place in Australia, and then Ballarat, which is up north, close to the entrance to Death Valley. All these places had 1 or 2 old miners still living there, and 3 or 4 shacks were still usable. Most of the other shacks had collapsed, and invariably there were some remnants of the old mining industry. One place had a big stamp mill, all rusted up, but very impressive. We had a dry blower, a gadget that has a little blower to blow the dust out, and so we got the dust down to what we thought was, as far as we could go, black stuff, black iron sand, that we carefully put in jars to take back to the camp and then wash it. And this way we all got about oh well, $10 or $20 worth of gold in a little glass, just enough to show and brag about.